Have you ever wondered why we celebrate tea parties? They're usually filled with laughter, tasty treats, and of course, hot cups of tea. But let's take a trip down memory lane, where tea parties weren't always about fun and games. Yes, there was a time when a tea party sparked a revolutionary change. It was unlike any tea party you've ever imagined. This was the Boston Tea Party, a very different kind of party. Want to know why? In 1773, a long time ago, people in Boston had a tea party that changed history. Now, this wasn't your typical tea party with dainty teacups and fluffy scones. Oh no, this was a very different kind of party. You see, back then, Boston was a part of a bigger place called the 13 Colonies, and they were all ruled by a country far, far away across the big blue ocean, Britain. The people living in Boston weren't too happy about this, especially because the British king kept asking them to pay more and more money for their tea. This money was called a tax, and the king's latest tea tax was just too steep. So the people of Boston, who we'll call the colonists, decided they had had enough. They thought, why should we pay so much for our tea? And then they came up with a plan, a daring plan, to show the British king that they weren't going to just sip their overpriced tea quietly. On a cold December night, a group of colonists decided to dress up, but they weren't dressing up for a fancy party. They disguised themselves as Native Americans, the original inhabitants of the land. They smeared their faces with coal dust and wore blankets as cloaks. Then, under the cover of darkness, they crept towards the harbor where 3 big ships from Britain were docked, laden with chests full of tea. The colonists climbed aboard these ships, and guess what they did? They didn't make a cuppa. Instead, they took those chests of tea and threw them overboard, one by one, into the chilly sea. The next morning, the harbor was a swirling soup of tea leaves. The colonists had made their point loud and clear. They were ready to stand up against unfairness, even if it meant throwing a whole lot of tea into the sea. So they disguised themselves as Native Americans, boarded the ships at night, and threw all the tea into the sea. Can you believe that? Now, you might be thinking, what happened next? Well, after the Boston Tea Party, the British government was not too happy. They were shocked, to say the least, and decided to react strongly. They passed what we now call the Intolerable Acts. These were laws that were, you guessed it, intolerable or unbearable for the colonists. They closed the Boston Harbor, changed the government of Massachusetts, and even allowed British soldiers to stay in people's homes. Can you imagine having a soldier as an uninvited guest at your house? The colonists were even more upset with these changes. They felt their rights were being ignored and that they were being treated unfairly. This discontent among the colonists grew and grew, like a snowball rolling down a hill. And guess what? This event, the Boston Tea Party, played a significant role in sparking something big, something really big. It was the spark that lit the bonfire of the American Revolution. The colonists decided they had had enough. They weren't going to be treated unfairly anymore. They wanted their own country, their own rules, their own tea. The Boston Tea Party was a bold statement that said, "No more. We won't be treated unfairly." It was a big step towards America's freedom. So, the next time you sip a cup of tea, remember the brave folks who took a stand over 200 years ago. So that's the story of the Boston Tea Party. Let's take a moment to revisit the heart of our tale. A group of people making a stand against something they felt was unfair. They were upset about the taxes on their tea, and they made their feelings clear in a unique way, didn't they? By tipping a whole bunch of tea into the harbor, they were saying, "We won't stand for this." This act, as simple as it may seem, was a loud and clear message to those in power. It sparked a journey towards the American Revolution, where the seeds of independence were sown and nurtured. So, you see, the Boston Tea Party was more than just a spillage of tea. It was a bold statement, a protest against injustice, and a stepping stone towards freedom. And that, my friends, is how a tea party became a symbol of freedom. Quite different from our tea parties today, isn't it?